Hello, 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 everyone. Hi, welcome in. My name is Lainey Rose, and I'm the events manager here at East City Bookshop. Thank you for joining us in person today and virtually if you're watching that way. By show of hands, who here is at the store for the very first time? Okay, well, thank you for joining us for the very first time. We hope it's not your last. And to our returning customers, hi, welcome back. So excited to see you. We always have something on the calendar here with a little something for every reader. All the information about our upcoming events and our 14 different book clubs can be found on our website. And even though it feels really early to be discussing this, we like to remind everyone that it's never too early to start your holiday shopping. Stress less and shop early this year. And speaking of stress, we are offering a 10% discount on all full price books to furloughed government workers and those who've been laid off. We also have a limited supply of free audiobooks from our friends at Libro FM. Just show your government ID at checkout, and it is one per customer for audiobooks. This is in person only. Sorry to our virtual customers, but if you're able to come in, we've got the discount going. Before we get to tonight's event, some housekeeping details. Number one, if you could take a moment to silence your cell phones, we would appreciate that. Nothing more awkward. Number two, if you need a restroom, it's upstairs past the cash registers and the greeting cards. Number three, we will have time for questions tonight for both in-person and virtual attendees. So even if you're watching via Zoom, you can participate. Please put those questions in the Q&A feature so that we can see them and can ask on your behalf. And finally, most importantly, if you need to purchase a copy of any of their books, we've got them all and they're all upstairs. You can purchase them prior to the signing line that will happen afterwards. And when Yume first approached us about being a stop on the Traveling Sci-Fi Fantasy Festival, I absolutely leapt at the chance. I'm the one that gets to make the call on whether or not we do an event, and I was like, yes, please. I desperately, desperately wanted to be a stop on this tour. Joining us today is four powerhouse authors, and I can't wait to hear them all talk. And I will now introduce each one of them. Kitasei is a Japanese and American speculative fiction author of The Deep Sky, The Stardust Grail, and Salt Crop. She lives in Brooklyn with two cats, Boondoggle and Filibuster. Ray Nayler is the author of the novel The Mountain and the Sea and won the Locus Award for Best First Novel in the novella Tusks of Extinction. Called one of the up-and-coming masters of sci-fi short fiction by Locus, Naylor's stories have been published widely as well as in many of Best of anthologies. Julia V was a trial lawyer in the Silicon Valley for over 2 decades. She attended UC Berkeley and majored in Asian studies. She often writes with co-author Ken Bebel. There we go. I can read, I promise. I work in a bookstore. Their novel, Ebony Gate, is an Asian inspired urban fantasy and was a Golden Poppy finalist for the Octavia E. Butler Award. And finally, two-time Nebula Award winner Fran Wilde has so far published 8 novels, a poetry collection, and over 70 short stories for adults, teens, and kids. She is the managing editor of the Sunday Morning Transcript and teaches or has taught for schools including Vermont College of Fine Arts and St. Mary's College of Maryland. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to all 4 authors of this evening. Big round of applause. Here they come. Keep that applause going. Don't stop those hands. Come on up. Ba-da-da-da-da. We need to play walkout music.
Everyone. Are these mics live? Okay. Uh, Thank you so much for our fabulous introductions. And this is a packed house. I'm so excited to see everyone. Like one of the most nerve-wracking things as an author is like you're worried no one will come, right? And so like here's Yume and I like on the Amtrak being like, do you think people are coming out?
It's like being back in grade school and being like, "Oh, I threw a birthday party. Is anyone coming?" I know you came, so thank you. We wanted to just before we start the discussion, just give you a little bit of context about like why we ended up doing this event. And also I will explain this binder. So a bunch of us had books coming out this season. And I had a book Salt. I have a book Salt Crop, which is here, that was released 2 weeks ago. And I'm an extrovert, so for me, it's way more fun to do joint events. And I don't know if any of you have been to, Comic-Con or Worldcon style events, conferences where you can go and just listen to panel discussions about, uh, topics. And I guess to me, I thought my goal is with a book tour. Yes, we hope we sell books, and most importantly, we hope that the bookstore sells books. So even if you don't buy our books tonight, we hope you buy some books tonight. But also, we hope it's an interesting discussion and sort of brings you the flavor of those conventions that we get to go to, and sort of sparks some thought, and that we make new friends. That's my goal. So thank you guys for coming. And we are we were so ambitious that we were like, you know what, this was a we already were like, maybe we'll do this again next year. This is super
It's
successful.
kind of like when you go to Burning Man the first time.
Yeah.
So
I
you
know
know
people
what? Next year I will bring X, Y, and Z.
exactly, and especially because we learned so much from this process.
Yes.
So
Exactly like Burning Man.
especially your walk from the station yesterday in Baltimore. Sorry. Um, so we have a binder that we'd love for you all to sort of to sign, and we're doing a giveaway of some of our books after the festival is done. So one lucky person will get a big old stack of books, and mostly it's because we want to know how you heard about this, so that the next time we do it, because there probably will be a next time, we uh, don't spin our wheels on the publicity and marketing. So I will pass this around. Actually, we pass this down the line and start it over there. But anyway, so the Traveling Festival, as it has come together this year, is 8 nights, 8 panel discussions in 8 cities, and this is night 3. So thank you.
Thanks for coming out, everyone. So, as you may had said, there are some really big books coming out this year, and we were so excited about these latest novels. And I was like, okay, well, I get to moderate, so that means I get to be the super fan tonight and talk about these books. So, I think what I'll do is just ask each author to start with Fran and give us like the 1 or 2 second pitch for their book, so you get this flavor before we dive into the questions.
When the rich live in a fantasy world and the rest of us live in a sci-fi world, only thieves can solve the problem. Set in a new version of DC.
Worse than this version.
I would like to withhold my answer until the end.
Mine is about the collapse of two systems, a Western governmental system that has gone with AI prime ministers that are there to optimize the distribution of resources for everyone. Goes super well. And an authoritarian system in which the president has been downloading his mind into a new body to maintain power for generations.
Do the two kiss?
It's not spicy. If that's
No.
asking.
That would
Please do not ship the
end.
heads of government.
But actually, knowing an element of your novel, Ray, that is actually an ironic question for you to ask, Fran. I actually really appreciated part of the planning. I got to read everybody's books, so I can vouch for the quality here on this panel. And my book, Salt Crop, is my third book. It's a climate dystopian novel about two sisters who sail across the ocean in search of a missing sister. And I would say it's good for people who really enjoyed Wild Dark Shore this year, or Station 11, which I know everyone says that, but I didn't say that. That is what people have said. So
I said it. So I am not a dystopian author, but my series was pitched as what if we had like a magical John Wick that was populated with a cast of crazy rich Asians? And so it's set in San Francisco. This trilogy is complete, and very excited to see Pearl City here amongst these luminaries next to me. One of my favorite things is world building. And so when we were talking about this topic about the future and gosh, you predicted the future and how does it show up in your work? I think for me, I always start with the question of like, okay, well, what elements of the future did you want to forecast into your work?
first of all, I just want to say, of all of our books, I think your book is probably the future that we all prefer. Magical people running San Francisco sounds delightful. But yeah, no, that's my.
What elements did I want to predict? None. I don't want to be right about anything.
Yeah, you really don't want to see the future rapidly approaching in your rear view as you type the end. That is not what you're going for.
Yeah, I don't want to be right about anything. I mean, I've actually fought really hard in like essays and stuff about this idea that science fiction is strictly about predicting the future, but I don't think anyone here is actually believes that it is. And I've said that instead, I prefer to think of it as predicating rather than predicting, meaning that you're like sort of taking something and you're saying, well, what if we added this element in? Or what if, this thing happened, and then predicating a whole world based on that sort of change, right? And then that helps you kind of shine this light on maybe what's going on now or on like certain, other elements. And it doesn't have to be a technology. It could be, many different things. Ursula K. Le Guin had all kinds of predications that were like not technological, right? But instead had things to do with society, governance, gender, other things.
Well, and I think your work explores that some of our human wants and needs, like the need for immortality or to seek immortality, has been around a very long time. What technology gives us is tactics, right? Tools, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think for me, a friend of mine, Elizabeth Bear, said that if you are using buckshot, you're going to hit something. And that's kind of what sci-fi is, let's pull some things in and see what happens if we shake the box. For me, I started this story in 2011. I set it aside. I started some more. I wrote this on a 3-chapter pitch. And the pitch was basically, what if we are, it's not dystopian. Well, it's sort of dystopian, but it's more post-apocalyptic. So things are getting much better. Just ask anyone, they'll tell you. And the pushback that I had at the time that I was initially pitching it was, well, if something major happens, and in my book, the wealthy refer to it as the turbulence, and the not so wealthy refer to it as the mess. And that's really all that anybody wants to say about it. And the pushback initially was, well, nobody would do that. If something major happened, everybody would talk about it and then they'd fix it, right? Right. So that was, coming up. I was writing it in between other books because this is the book that didn't let me go. But what really kicked in was not a future cast, but more what happens when you have all the wealth in the world, literally, is that you spend a lot of time and energy proving to other people how wealthy you are by basically being more wealthy than everybody else. And so everything I write has a game in it. That's just what happens. And this one, the wealthy are inviting performance thieves, entertainers, to their parties so that they can be robbed and then either buy all of the things back if the thieves win, which then the wealthy get to say, look how wealthy I am. I just got all your stuff back. Or if they catch the thieves, they also win because they look how powerful and wonderful I am. So it's a form of entertainment now.
I had this concept that I was referring to as the immortal Turk, which was like
the mechanical Turk.
right.
Yes.
That this idea that like, right.
Yeah.
Well, this idea that like, no matter what the technology is that you build, there's a human in there.
Mhm.
Right. And it may be removed like through 1,000 little tiny drawers, right? And you have to open up the machine and see like, oh, like there's the bias, like there's the human. So you can put it through like all these different layers. And this book kind of came out of that. I like thought that like bias is going to come through. There's no such thing as like some system to solve your problems that isn't fundamentally going to be a human system.
Well, you also had, I'm sorry, this is now we're taking you on a little bit of a rabbit hole, but you had a quote in your book that I cannot quote word for word. Sorry, I'm not that good. But you made a point about how ideas always come from somewhere. And there's like this whole theme in your book about how like people think that the idea was theirs, but of course like someone gave it to them, right? Like ideas don't just spontaneously sort of appear in your mind. And I meant to bring this up last night, but I'm glad we're doing two events together because now I can bring it up today. It's like I think speculative fiction is sort of like that because what we are doing is we are sort of putting ideas out into the ether. And one of the things that I think is interesting about what you guys are sort of describing with your world building. See, I am bringing it back to the original question is that I think, like Ray says, it's you start with a premise, but what I'm interested in is not just the science and the technology and how that's changed, but how it impacts society and how society evolves with those with the change in those premises. Yeah. And then you inevitably get emails from people saying, "Well, this isn't hard science fiction." And to which I say that science fiction is a range, so that's fine. Um, but yeah, so I think that the interesting thing though about the whole exercise of writing science fiction is that you write something and you think it's maybe probably if it is a possible future, it's like 200 years in the future, and then something happens in the news and you're like, oh, maybe it's next year. I don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
I
can
do
I-
feel like that
Okay.
for
Yeah.
near future. That is as you research for near future scenarios, you realize it accelerates so much more rapidly than you think. Like I read the Army's 50-year guide for helicopters, and it's not 50 years. Like they're going to do it in, 5 years, 5 months. Like it's fast, right?
So it'll all be good.
So one of my favorite experiences was reading Diamond Age and Snow Crash in like 2003, 2004, as I was interviewing for jobs in San Francisco. And I was a programmer and I was like, oh, this is speaking to me. This is amazing. And then I was passing Snow Crash on about 5 years later. And the person I passed it on to was like, well, this is really derivative, isn't it? Like, I mean, Google Earth exists. I'm like, yes, it does. And so there is that sort of, please do not invent the torment nexus sort of situation. But also, I think we're all in conversation with each other, especially if you've read things or been in panels. But I'm in conversation with Bill Gibson. I'm in conversation with Neil Stevenson. There are pieces of my novels that are absolute nods to them because that they are part of my consciousness. And I think that part of the idea doesn't just birth out of you. Your book is always going to be in conversation with Lord of Light and also Leigh Bardugo, and there's going to be elements of
Fourth Wing.
yeah, or just like the peripheral. For me, that is one of the most perfect books that I have ever read. And as somebody who does coding and gaming and also is just dealing with the future, it's so amazing to me to see other books in conversation with it that don't know that they're in conversation with it necessarily. And I think I know that I'm in conversation with those books, so that happens too.
I did want to ask you, like, how far in the future, when you were setting Salt Crop, were you imagining this climate scenario that?
So I always intentionally, I think I've probably said this before in other places, but when I set out to write my novels, I do have a very exact notion of what year it is. I don't think I can remember off the top of my head. It's probably like 100 years in the future. And also exactly where they are at each point in time, especially in this novel. And then I intentionally go back and I file off all the serial numbers because I think we've all read 2001, which obviously is not So you don't want to like it's very easy for near future science fiction to become dated very quickly if you put years in it. So I always try to make it feel slightly vague. But I would say probably 100 years in the future. Which now to me actually seems maybe optimistically far in the future. Do you do the same thing?
I think that like I was just thinking about like the technology levels and things more than like the time in the future. Like I grew up in Silicon Valley. My father's a hardware engineer, right? And so I come from this like sort of background of like knowing the hucksterism and the hype of Silicon Valley. And like some of it is hucksterism, others is like just this like self-fulfilling feedback loop of hype that's in engineers' brains where they're like, clearly we're gonna do this in 5 years and it doesn't exist, right?
It would have if you believed harder.
But I think like my books are often a mix of things that are technologically all sort of aligned in like a time where it could be 50 or 100 years out. And then there's other things like people are like, well, how long before we invent an android like Evrim? And I'm like, never, because why? Right? First of all, but also like it's just not possible. I don't believe it. Like it's just kind of like you insert certain things in order to talk about something else. Evrim's not there because I think that we're going to make conscious androids. Evrim's there to talk about intelligence and consciousness as a theme.
Right.
Right.
But your most recent book, I noticed the places are not, the places are generally identifiable, but you generally like each of the chapter headings have sort of nondescript titles for the places. So like the Federation, which I assume is Russia, right? No? No?
Hey, wait. Now I have to interject because like all three of your books have very strong sense of place.
Yeah.
I mean
As does yours.
well, okay, San Francisco, but
With San Francisco food.
I didn't even stick a food question in my pre-planned questioning, but I did wonder about place research. Like, did you guys spend a lot of time researching some particular anchoring elements for your future, right? Like anchored to physical location.
No, I mean I lived in all the places that the book takes place for sure. Like
They're definitely not Russia.
I definitely not Russian. No, I mean I could see and I have to be able to like see and feel it. Like Kondao, where the Mountain in the Sea takes place, I spent months there, and so I literally when I was writing the Mountain in the Sea could turn my head in the character and see exactly what they were looking at, like see the abandoned hotel, see the beach, how far it was to the beach, every detail of all those scenes. And it's hard for me to write if I don't have that sense of place. So I feel like if I haven't been there, I build it in my head anyway. Like I'll build every part of that warehouse or whatever that they're walking around. And the one place I haven't been to, and this is kind of like no one's caught on to this, but in the book, the scene where Palmer meets Lilia takes place in Azovstal.
You're right. I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
I actually felt like it was Eastern German almost.
Yeah,
when I
but it's
read
it's
that
actually
part.
the ruins of the Azovstal factory, right? That they just have this like ruin bar in where all the backpackers are hanging out in this like future scene, and they're just all drinking there like it's no big deal.
Okay, I was at that bar.
What?
I mean, no, I was at that bar in East Germany in like
Yeah.
in the 90s. That was
Exactly.
literally just like you could see the East German tower in the distance, and yeah,
But it's
that's
Azovstal.
wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
So I also, I think, need to have a very specific idea of where they are. Not necessarily places that I have been, but if you haven't been, then you spend quite a lot of time on Google Earth walking around virtually in the space and then, watching a lot of YouTube videos about a day in the life of this influencer. Oh, influencers are so helpful, you guys. Like all of the day in the life videos are
Plus the digital
researched.
content creators.
It's so appreciated. It's so great. And I actually interviewed a couple people, like a young woman who lives on a sailboat in Arctic Norway and solo sails around by herself. And she was very kind to answer a bunch of questions to hopefully make this more accurate. But yes, no. So I had there's a website where you can sort of chart based on the type of boat that you're sailing, how fast how fast the boat is sailing and how far you can cover from A to B. And so I have a whole sense of where they traveled and how many days passed. And then again, I sort of sanded off those details, because I actually think giving you all of that information would have been quite boring. But trust me, I did do the work.
I think definitely you need to know more than your book knows. And you need to give your characters less information than you know. You just need to give them what they need to survive from page to page quite often. Although it's tempting sometimes to give them more, but they're, it for me, I have my family is 4 generations of engineers in the United States at this point, and I'm going to get notes if I get stuff wrong. So I give myself a certain amount of time to do research and there's a Google notification that says stop researching, because otherwise I'll just keep going. So I pulled like the sewer schematics for DC. I looked at the different ways that the Smithsonian Museum.
Sewer schematics. That's amazing.
That's a plot point.
I mean, I'm a if you look up the first interview for my first book, it was about sewers, so I kind of have a theme.
I love that.
But it didn't go in the book. That's not in the book, but it's something that I know because I needed to logic out why they had to move DC. And what happened to the other cities, and sea level rise simulations are very useful. But in my mind, this isn't just an ecological disaster. This is a jackpot level disaster with multiple things happening over a period of time. And so I also looked at, how the Smithsonian is currently engaged in flood proofing all of its collections. I looked at how people are reacting to various, disasters and actively pretending that like that thing didn't happen is one of them. But I was also studying the city-state theories that are coming out for the future. And I was looking at just elements of what happens when a group comes back together after a major disaster. So it's pulling the past in as well. And the past is such a great guide. So you will, if you're reading the book, you will notice that there's references to the Great Fire of London and the fire judges, because they were engaged at that time in looking at provenance and who owns what and who's responsible for what in London after London burned. And this is something that is a huge theme in my book, is who owns what and who is stealing what and why.
Right.
No, like the next book that's coming out in 2026, Palaces of the Crow, takes place in the Lithuanian forest in World War II. And we went to Lithuania, gathered all.
I went to Florida for my next one. I think you won.
Oh, that's way, like, Lithuania was, I'm sure, far more fun.
I think so too.
But they gathered all the herbs in the forest, figured out what they're all like called. You look at the trees, like, right, you think about, like, I mean, you do all kinds of, like, to the point where I will go and do historical research about what the weather was like on a particular day in a particular place, to make sure that, if it was cloudy that day, it's cloudy in the book, because someone will look it up.
Yeah.
But also because, like, writing is kind of just an excuse to do research for me too.
So you can probably tell this panel, we love our research. And it is like a running joke amongst fantasy writers that if you include a horse, you are going to get an email.
Trains, clothing, horses. There's so many, but those are the big ones. Trains especially, don't mess up your trains. Dear God, don't mess up your trains.
Well, I mean, also, like, if you write a space opera, I mean, my second book was a space opera. Like, many people email me and say faster than light travel is not possible, and I'm like, I know.
FTL emails?
They jump through nodes. It's. I know.
When we're talking about predicting the future, one of the cool things that we have going for us as sort of an advantage is the metatext, the sci-fi metatext, because, like, Yume says faster than light, and everybody goes, yes, I understand that. Somebody says vampire, we all understand that because that's part of the metatext. If somebody says Ansible, that's also part of the metatext, and we can play with it's kind of a standing on the shoulders of giants elements. We can play with those things and amp them up, or say, no, that actually didn't work. But when the gotcha commentary kicks in with, oh, you can't do that because that's not real, and you're like, but what if it was? What if that's our job, is to actively ask what if it was? And when I said, you don't want to see the future catching up with you in the rearview mirror, we're asking what if it was, and how do we remain human in it? And then, that metatextual conversation just elevates because of it.
My favorite criticism like that was, someone was like, about the mountain and the sea, Tibet, is not really going to become some futuristic like master of like drone technology. Like that's completely ridiculous. I'm like, I know it's totally ridiculous, and I put it in there because it's awesome. Awesome.
You know,
Like
that's
Tibet as a technological superpower that puts out like AI powered drones, but based on some Buddhist system of how those things should operate. That was a great idea, and I made it happen because I can.
you know what? That's basically what Andy Weir said about Artemis, right? He had them launch from Kenya. He's like, I just thought it was way cooler. It was like, you know, and you get to do that when you're an author.
Yeah. Like why? Because
Yeah.
my
But-
book.
The real question for me is, since your book has, I will say by far, having read all 4 books, including mine too many times, your book has the best food. So when you put the food descriptions in it, do you like have to like, eat it to really describe it?
Yes, because you know, accuracy is important and it is part of research.
Of course.
So is there a cookbook?
Oh, you know what?
Yes.
For my next content creation mission.
Most of my book takes place in London and Russia, so no fair.
So like the food, no.
Exactly. See, I told you. I told you. I told you.
So when Yume and I were brainstorming these like future questions, one of the ones that she came up with was like, well, has you ever written anything that's come true? And oddly, in 2018, I wrote about this face cream, like, and they ended up making it like 6 months later.
What kind of face cream was it?
It was for weather protectant, like
Oh,
for
gosh.
wind to prevent like wind burn and like in icy climates. Because I was writing about an alien culture that terraforms the earth and makes it icy cold.
I mean, that's the kick with Snow Crash is it's being snow derivative because they made it. They made Google Earth because they like Snow Crash so much. But they won't admit it. So Neil Stephenson still hasn't gotten paid.
Well, and they made Geordie's glasses
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they, like all of the things that we wish we had occasionally go in the books. Like I would love a gate that just, you walk through it and it goes, "You're medically fine. Congratulations." And there's like cookies at the other side or something like that would be great. But yeah, no.
I think the 0.5s in the mountain and the sea were one of those. There
Yes.
were these, right? The AI.
That's immediately what I thought
AI
about.
people. And then I got this wave of like, oh my God, Ray Nayler like
Yeah.
predicted the future. People are having relationships with AI. And I was like, this is actually not the case. All I did was read about Japan, which was way ahead of us with like marrying pillows and like having relationships with chatbots and all of those things. And then I got the idea that like, what people really want in a relationship quite often, unfortunately, is half a person. Like they don't want someone who has all their own real desires. They want someone who's like enough different from them that it's interesting to talk to them, but doesn't really want anything from them. And so like this 0.5s would be a way of doing that. And unfortunately, yeah, I invented the torment.
Your newest book also has basically government is run by AI, and obviously that's not what's happening yet, but it is true that government is starting to use AI more, which is to do simple functions.
Albania has an AI prime minister.
Wait, really?
Yes, everyone emailed it to me immediately. Like everyone in the world.
I take it back.
Yeah, it was like Ray, stop. I'm like, I didn't do it. Like, also, I said it was a really bad idea.
I was going to say actually, because my answer to this question was going to be there are a lot of things in salt crops that are sort of framed as the future, but have actually already happened. And I think that's kind of fun when you're writing your future. Obviously there's a lot about agricultural monopolies, which is a real thing, and the way that crops and pesticides sort of are designed sort of together. But also there's a scene in this where the seed vault, in the seed vault, there's been flooding and some, in this case, like some of the seeds have been affected, but Svalbard has actually had that happen where, it's a doomsday vault that's meant to be sort of preserving seeds for the end of time. And they had an unseasonably warm winter and there was some flooding, which is scary. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So so that's something that's actually already happened, but as I'm presenting it as, maybe in the future.
Well, and Ray, you have this thing in the beginning of the book where the citizens have a radius that they can travel, and it's sort of based on their citizenship score, right? And they can get points docked. And I felt like, isn't that already happening in China?
It is.
Yeah.
So most of the surveillance in where the axe is buried, most of that surveillance state that's built out in the Federation is happening to Uyghurs in Western China right now. So the social credit score, the radius outside of which you're not allowed to travel, all of the facial recognition, all like a lot of that stuff is really already happening. And I just transferred it to a different sort of scene, which is, like that's a big trick too in science fiction, is you just move things around a little bit and people are like, oh my God, can you imagine them doing that to people? And you're like, yes.
Why, yes, sadly.
Yes, I
That's
can.
like the famous Margaret Atwood Handmaid's Tale thing, which is that like everything that she put in that book, she based on things that had already happened.
Yeah, exactly. Or the fishing vessel slavery in the mountain and the sea. There's 40,000 people who are slaves on fishing boats all over the world. That's about the low estimate, right? And everyone's like, oh my God, that's totally going to happen. They're going to enslave people on fishing boats. Like, yes.
Well, so we all did a lot of research for our books, and Fran already talked about one thing that didn't make it in, like the shore map. But are there fun bits of research that you're like, oh, I think this is very cool, but I didn't get to put it in the book?
Octopuses. Going back to the mountain and sea again. This was just like a weird fact that I discovered. Octopus neurology. So they have this ring of neurons that connects their arms, and their arms have so many neurons in them. They're basically like brains. But the right-left division in the octopus is way more difficult to pass through that barrier than it is in humans. So if an octopus's left side learns how to solve a maze, its right side won't know how to solve that maze until tomorrow.
Oh,
Whoa.
wow.
Like it takes 24 hours for that knowledge to get from one side of the octopus brain to the other. And I was like, I don't have any place to put this, but I'm glad I know it.
I totally feel like that before coffee a lot. A lot. I mean the sewer system stuff didn't go in. There's a lot of things that didn't go in. I'm obsessed with bank vaults. I love just interlocking things. I love code breaking. I love just the history of code breaking, and I love the iterative failure of code breaking, but I'm a big failure person. I like engineers don't just trade in successes, they trade in iterative failure. That's the job. And I loved researching sort of the what ifs for each city that I kind of tangentially touched on. One of the things that I did a deep dive into researching for is going to be in the second book, so I can't say seasteading enough, but it's totally in the book. So
I read a whole book on weather patterns in the Arctic, just so that I could write a couple sentences about, oh, the clouds were like very lovely, But it was a very interesting book. What about you?
I researched something like 2,000 years of Eastern dragons, but it only made it into the book in a very decorative way because the more modern interpretation that's been sort of sanitized is that the nine sons of the dragon is a motif that you'll find in a lot of Chinese artwork. It's on rooftops, it's on bells, it's on swords. So we decided that was actually probably visually the easiest one to use. So yeah, I have nowhere to put all this knowledge of Chinese dragons from the north. I'm ready to write like a paper.
Or just like, oops, another novel.
So it's funny, you were talking about vaults, and I was thinking about how one of the things I love about like heist movies and vaults in general is the very tactical elements of it. Like the way it sounds, like the like the clicking and the physical act, but you have a very futuristic type of security system. No spoilers, but I was wondering if there were some analog things that you also purposely put into your work just because you like them.
yes. But heists are like that. Heists and a friend of mine and I have been in conversation about this, just they are about competence. One person being very good at one thing and, oops, accidentally getting assigned to the other thing. But like you get to play along with watching this competence happen. And so hearing the tumblers go, watching, my least favorite trope in the whole world is somebody energetically typing on the computer and then yelling, "I'm in," because that is not a thing. But there are
That's how all hackers do it,
I
Fran.
know. I know. Yes, absolutely. There is just so much that you can play with in terms of smells and tactility and motioned kinetics are really, really interesting when you're writing a heist because it, just like everything else, has ups and downs and it isn't just crawling through air vents, but sometimes it is, and that's really fun too.
And putting on cool costumes.
Yes. Well, I mean, I knew we were going to get to the tactical ball gown eventually. I do have a lot of because the craft of certain things, handcrafts, fascinate me. The making of hats, the crafting of dresses, absolutely fascinates me. And coding, in my own understanding of it, from the Mechanical Turk to Eliza to Sophie to all of the history of chatbots from the 1800s on, is absolutely about tactile interaction of our brains with a digital sensibility, just that punch card sensibility. And I can still smell my dad's punch cards from the University of Pennsylvania. So it really does come across that, like, if you are doing a programmable dress that can be converted into many things, including a tactical ball gown with many pockets for pickpocketing, you can invoke that in so many different ways. I was fascinated in when I was doing my master's degree in information architecture, I was fascinated by a technology called e-paper. I don't know if anybody remembers e-paper, but I thought it would be so cool if it wasn't just, bidirectional color, black and white flipping that was what the e-paper was supposed to be. But like if you could just approximate this, a cloud and your plane would disappear. And so I built that into the dress. I built so many other things into these clothing things and all of the other modifications that the thieves use, which are like, it's okay, I can swallow my contacts because they're organic, and that's disgusting. And just like the gross out aspect of, I've got one character who isn't used to the rich foods and really tries very hard to eat something that he shouldn't have. And that act of like trying to swallow a very rich piece of food that he's not used to is part of the gag, and it's also part of the failure of the gag.
I'm really interested in retrofitting. Like this is something that I've used a lot in my books. Like one of the fun parts for me of Where the Axe is Buried was the retrofitted Lada Niva, like this like shitty Russian 4x4 that's just so uncomfortable. And then they've like put this giant box up against where the steering.
You didn't want to make a Trebby into a truck?
and like the forest walker that's had like all the controls ripped out inside, right? And just like the uncomfortableness quite often of like retrofitted technology. I like to kind of play with that, and especially like military things that have been like reused for like civilian use, right? And where they've just had like the control panel torn out and replaced with something else. Like I love those little tactile details. Maybe it comes from spending way too long in the former Soviet space where a lot of that's around. But and like as a government employee, I like to joke sometimes that like the State Department's motto is yesterday's technology tomorrow. Like, there's a lot of retrofitting that goes on, right? Because like the government has to procure things. This takes a long time. You're usually not using the most updated
Can confirm.
thing, right? And I like to play with that whole idea that technology is uneven, like it's unevenly distributed and unevenly used.
But also, I mean, the cool thing with retrofitting is to quote the person that you're quoting, is the street finds its own uses for things. And that's part of the game. That's part of the cool thing. I've got a line that that in the book, that this is hitting on the spoilers that I said I didn't want to go to, but you guys are special apparently, where one of my characters turns to another and says, "I hope you're safe as fast." And it was one of those lines that I was like, I don't know if it's going to stay because it's really a giveaway line. But at the same time, I consider bank safes to be not fast. So let's play with it. Let's play with the kinetics of this. Let's see what happens.
I also love retrofitting, and part of the reason why I love retrofitting in science fiction to me is that it's which I think you both do in your books is that I think the assumption that all of this technology that we're creating today will be usable tomorrow is first of all, like we already that is anybody who is my age who used floppy disks know that's not true. They make nice coasters though. Um, but no, I mean, like even when you think about the kind of technology that we're making today that consumes so much energy at a time when we're not securing our source of energy in the future. And that's sort of the premise actually of Salt Crop is that when you talk about uneven distribution of technology, it is a future where, yes, technology has advanced, but places, countries that have not done anything to secure their energy sustainability or their energy future against climate change and the depletion of fossil fuels are totally screwed because they can't really use the stuff that has been invented. So the very people who maybe invented some of that technology can no longer actually use it with such great volume because they don't have the resources to use it.
And then there's like this, like all these like kludging sort of solutions that like the Russians came up with for things, or like you would come across in like travels. One of my favorites is like this is called a kapitelnik. This thing is insane. It's basically you take a metal wire, like a little loop of wire, and it plugs directly via a cord into the wall, and you hang it on the side of like a bowl of water or a bucket of water, and you heat the water up with it.
It's fine. What could possibly go wrong?
Okay, so I was talking with Joe Haldeman at one point. I was interviewing about food, and I'm sorry, this is a digression, but it's also street finds its own uses. And I was going to interview him about MREs because he served, and he leaned into the camera and said, "Do you want to know how to make a pizza with plastique?" And I was like, "Yes, let's do it." The answer is very carefully. But it was just like it was that amazing sort of we have these resources and we want to do that.
Yeah. The guards, so when I was in Afghanistan, the guards in their guard shack, which would get really cold in the winter in Kabul, had a big like brick with lines filed in it that they had then wrapped in wire and then plugged that wire directly into the wall to heat that brick, which they would then like put their feet on carefully not to touch the wire, which would electrocute you. Right. But like that would keep their little shack warm. Right. And so I like to like invent
As a little
those.
treat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they also did things like put sights on their shotguns because they were jealous of people with AK-47s and stuff. But I love those little details because I feel like it makes a world so like real. That's what people do. They find a way.
I mean, this is the one thing that we're not talking about because we're talking about so you've written the future is believability and sense of wonder.
Yeah.
And I think those things are really important if you're writing because you have to have that sense of wonder. You have to have that, oh, this is slightly different. This is slightly left of what I expected in order to want to read more of something that's very deeply world built. My first book 10 years ago, I spent a lot of time on the phone with Noah and talking about supercell storms and what I could do inside a supercell storm. And it's not a lot of the book. And my daughter at the time, who doubted that I was even a writer, I was, not supposed to be doing this. She's like, why are you doing this? Why are you talking to scientists? You have giant invisible flying carnivorous squid in your book. Why do you need to know how a supercell storm works? And the answer is because the more believable you can make the supercell storm, the more people will buy the giant invisible flying carnivorous squid. Also, that's really fun to say, and it has not gotten any less fun to say in 10 years.
But yeah, I mean, speculative fiction is the genre of wonder, right? And when I read Fran's book, I love the elegance and how they are conducting the heist, the sleight of hand, the distraction, the razzle dazzle. But in the reality, heists were not that sophisticated. Lee Bardugo at the end of Six of Crows recommends like a book about Rembrandts, and you read about all these stolen Rembrandts, and it's literally guy walks up, yanks it off the wall,
brute force every time,
bashes the security guard and leaves. Like it was so disappointing.
Yeah.
I also want to say, like, just along those lines, that one of the things that I find most fun about your trilogy is the amount of legal detail there is in it, because Julia's a lawyer and there's a lot of contract law in it, which actually does. I know that doesn't sound like wonder, but it makes the wonder more fun.
You know, I think maybe because of my training, I see contracts all around us. Like, I'm not just talking about like, oh, I'm in public.
Dragon contracts, you know.
Well, if you ever read a book about the Fae, right? Fae bargain, there are rules and there are loopholes. Right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a good time for audience questions. And I have been told to faithfully repeat them into the microphone. So it may be easier than me trying to hand the microphone to you. Questions? Back there, sir.
Been writing something that is speculative and whilst writing it, you're looking at the world and like, uh-oh, this is no longer speculative. And if ever faced with that, what do you do then?
Okay, the question is, have you ever been writing something that you thought was speculative and then you looked around you in the world and were like, oh, wait. And then what?
Yes, mostly in short stories, but yes, and the answer is you embiggen it and you make it worse. As sort of a, okay, the what if has happened. Well, what if now that goes wrong? I like to break things. That's the engineer in me. So I like to break things and see how, if you put it together, back together wrong, what happens. So I'll break it.
Sometimes it happens in the 2 weeks between sending it out for edits and getting it back.
Technically, yes.
I like to often think about it doesn't really bother me usually when I find that kind of technology out in the world, because I like to think about like the ruins of things quite often. Like, what does future tech look when it's broken? And what happens to it after it's like no longer being used? I have a
It's your way about bringing up the Greeks.
no. I promise I'm not going to bring up the Iliad. I promise. But there's a story that I wrote called Yesterday's Wolf, which is about a girl in the mountains in Kyrgyzstan who finds buried like this war machine, like dog, basically. And she's having a problem with wolves killing her family's sheep. And she's a programmer. And she reprograms this lethal, solar powered, basically immortal war machine that just like it's not functioning because it was buried completely into a shepherd dog to keep her sheep safe and also to defend her rights against being kidnapped, to be married, and so it's like a thinking quite often like the attack dog is not that interesting, but then what is like a Kyrgyz shepherd attack dog? Right. And what uses do other people have for that abandoned technology from some earlier time?
I did make a Boston Dynamic dog into a drink cart at one point.
When I was writing Salt Crop, part of the premise was that it is in a world where government is greatly diminished, and then Doge happened, and it was too late. It's still in there. So I guess it's just like I said, it's not. It's a little near. The future is a little nearer than I realized. So I guess the answer is you just cry. I don't know. You feel depressed.
Alma Katsu, if anybody's familiar with Alma here, she's a great horror writer. She's also writes extraordinary espionage stories, and Red Widow and Red London are two of the books that she was actively writing while Putin was coming to power. And she had written a Ukraine invasion in as a plot element, and then it happened. And she ask her the next time you see her how she handled that, because just listening to her talk about being in edits while that was happening and having to pivot in order to stay ahead of the future was incredible.
Oh, over here.
But you mentioned you've been writing for at least 10 years, and you also mentioned that you'll get emails asking you about training, about tech that you gone wrong. So I'm just curious if in that time that you've been writing, that's changed the way people contact you, the way the things they care about, how many people care about it, just that dynamic. And you mentioned content creation. I'm sorry, it's kind of a broad question.
Okay, so if I understood the question, you were saying that since most of us have been writing for a while,
Since we're old.
I am a Gen Xer, but is it Is it different the way readers interact with us now in this new era of social media? Am I interpreting that correctly? Okay, I actually love hearing from readers. It's like very exciting. Even if it's, hi Julia, I really loved your book, but that thing about the horse on page 158 was totally wrong. I I would say that it is a different time, like the illusion of privacy, right? Like in having boundaries, but you do have to protect some boundaries about your space as a writer and the topics that you're going to tackle. It is still just incredibly lovely that you can post something on Blue Sky and someone can write back and say, I'll see you at New York City Comic Con. Like, I'm excited to have you sign my book. And I didn't know they were coming. It was like, because one thing that happens is people all over are reading your book and you don't know who they are, right? Until they reach out.
I mean, so my first novel came out 10 years ago. I've been publishing short fiction before that. I had two short stories come out in Asimov's and a short story in Nature magazine come out in like 2011, 2012, 2013. And all of those got mail. And specifically the people that will email me about trains are my uncles. But and they wanted to know how tall the towers were in updraft, like schematically, and what the rotation factor was in the window. And but what I love is the conversations and being in a panel situation like this and being able to talk with my fellow authors, but also hearing back from people and being like, this really struck me, or I have had a different experience with this. The got you people are much more on social media platforms that I don't trade in very much anymore, because I want to focus on my writing. And I do answer my mail. I write middle grade as well as adult, and I love getting mail from kids, and I love answering it because somebody answered me when I was a kid writing an author. So it's really important to me to do that. What I won't answer is somebody being like, well, I have all of this experience and you were obviously wrong in this. I'm like, you know what? I'm writing science fiction. It's right there on the tin. There is, and so I have to be a bit more careful about what I allow to distract me from my goal. But if it's a kid, no. And if it's a bot, absolutely not.
I think also there's been a definite, like, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but just the way that the political discourse has evolved very rapidly in the last, or it feels like it's been very rapid in the last 5 years. And so I do mostly love reader mail. It's delightful. And DMs also. I get a lot of reader DMs via Instagram, where Ray has a really good blurry photo series. That's what he calls it.
Series. Yes.
I really love
Check
it.
out.
It's great. It's
great photos.
It's really good. I'm obsessed with it. But no, I do also get a lot of emails which are like they've clearly read the entire book because they provide page number citations for the entire book, and it's all about like pronouns like that I've chosen to use, or queer references, and that I think is that is what I hope is like a very specific moment in time that's happening, but it's something that has definitely changed in the last couple years. I think at least it feels like it has. Side note, as readers, when I was first a debut author, I was like, why are people emailing me about typos? There's nothing I can do about those because it's already out, right? But actually, now when people send me typos, I actually send them to my editor because you have an ebook and the ebook changes immediately. So I can actually not only change it for a future edition because you guys have bought so many of my books that I can have it reprinting, right? But so I can change it, but I can also have it immediately fixed on the digital. So if you've ever wondered what you should do if you find a typo in a book, the answer is be very gentle, because some authors I think maybe are not as happy to hear about it as I am, but you can reach out to me and tell me.
Yeah, my friends
And I'll fix
screenshot it
Yeah.
and send to me, and even early readers sent that, and it was too late for the hardcover, but they got corrected in time for the
Yeah,
paperback. Yeah.
I just gaslight them and say, no, that's a word. No, just kidding.
Take a couple more questions. Oh, right here.
I really enjoyed your conversation about your world building techniques and how the interchange between that and the world that you live in. But I'm curious where in all of your writing processes your plots happen and how you bring that into like a genre that is so known and so fun, these big worlds and stuff.
Okay, so the question was about world building, and then how do we make our plots tie in with our worlds, right?
Do you want to go first?
I love world building, and so for us, we always start with like, what are the rules of this world? Like, who has the power and who doesn't have the power, right? How does money work? What does justice look like in this world? And then we're like, and who is the person who just doesn't fit, right? This is where conflict comes in, and so for me, conflict is driving the plot, and so I look for that problem person, right?
I have a very set process. I'm a very methodical writer. I think I talk a lot about using spreadsheets in
Love
my
a good
process.
spreadsheet.
I
Oh
love
my
spreadsheets.
gosh, yes.
And if you like spreadsheets and you write, I have a spreadsheet on my website that is mine because somebody kept asking me for it, so you can download it. But so I vibe for 20,000 words, and I just vibe, and then I take a step back and I figure out what the actual plot is, and then I'll go back to the beginning and I'll write from the beginning according to that outline. And then after I revise it once, I'll start doing a lot of research. So I don't usually do the research until actually after I've written what I call a zero draft, and that's because I think it gives you a better sense of like what you need to know, and helps you sort of enrich in the like actual story. But I think that the important thing is that the story itself has integrity and is an interesting read. And I will say, I hope this is true because I've said it now, I've repeated it now like 10 times, but I've heard that Amor Towles, who wrote A Gentleman in Moscow, also uses process for his historical research. He doesn't do his historical research until later in the process. So I read that somewhere and I felt very validated, and now I'm repeating it enough times that if it's not true, it will be believed.
Job.
Thank you.
I don't really know. I feel like my writing process is not very transparent to me. I have a very basic process. I get up really early in the morning, like at an ungodly hour sometimes, and I sit down.
Well, you start work at 5:45.
Yeah.
So
So
4.
yeah, sometimes. Not every day, luckily, but a lot of days. And I'm kind of half asleep. And the first thing I do is I go back about 5 to 10 pages and I just start editing what I wrote before. So I have no zero draft. Like my first draft, like I gave I give my agent a first draft. I'm like, here's the first draft of my book. He's like, Ray, like that is not what a first draft looks like at all, right? And thank you, but like that's not, it's like 50 or 100 times that I've looked at every sentence because I keep most of my writing process is actually just editing. So I'm kind of in that world and I'm looking around in the world and I'm sort of in the characters' heads and things seem to emerge out of that. But I don't obsess too much over like arcs of things because I feel like a lot of that is burned into my DNA already as a reader. Like I read all these books, I absorbed my culture to a sufficient degree that although I never have taken a writing class or done in any, groups or anything like that, it's all in there somewhere and you just naturally are going to do those arcs in a lot of ways. So I'm like a bad person to ask about process because my process is like physical. It's literally just sit down, start editing, maybe write a few paragraphs at the end, maybe get on a like tear and write like 10 pages, but like I don't know whether I'm really focusing on theme or plot or story or like what's the difference between plot and story half the time, just doing it.
I mean, you're right. I love world building. I would happily do it. I'm a game builder too. So, and I notice that I'm missing a plot when my characters start walking around the set going, what does this do? And what does this do? And does that spit out coins? Excellent. But it's not a story until I can hear 2 or more of my characters arguing about something. Because if they care enough about a thing to fight about it, then I've got the potential to say, well, why is this their story and what are they fighting for? And then the question becomes, what kind of world is this a problem? Is this a fight? And that creates the plot and that allows for the transformation at the end, which is really, I like to walk out of a movie feeling like I'm on a different planet than the one I walked in from. And I feel like the reason why we read stories is to be transformed, and you can't transform a reader without transforming your characters. And if your character is the same person at the end of the story as they started, then you haven't done that work, or that's not their story. So figuring out the plot that allows for that transformation and the change in the world and the characters is all sort of what I do. And I write a lot of brackets with go back and do the research for this later. So I don't do the world. I don't fill out any charts. I just write something that's like, cool trick. Hey, that's awesome. And then I look for who's fighting about it. And that becomes the story.
That's the rule of cool. Start there. So is it time? Oh, I'm getting the signal, friends. So really quickly, just where can we find you and your work?
Sure. You can find me at franwilde.net, and I have a Patreon as well that I do writing prompts and writing sprints with people. But mostly I'm teaching a how to write a heist class on Eventbrite on November 5th, and will happily take people along with that. And I need to link it somewhere, but you can search it. There's a very bad graphic that I did while I was on tour, so please don't judge my drawings by the really bad robber who's stealing letters. But otherwise, I'm around. I'm mostly exist on the internet, so that's Blue Sky, Instagram a little bit, and Patreon.
So raynayler.net, and you can sign up for my newsletter, which is quarterly, right around the solstice and equinox usually, because that's like the only way I can measure time anymore, I feel like. And I'll send you writing news and then 3 things that I'm interested in that I think you might be interested in as well. People seem to like that. Okay. And then Instagram, I got lots of blurry photos on Instagram.
They're really cool. So I'm most active on Instagram, where I go to look at Ray's blurry photos.
Yumi's really good on, she's good at like the stitch together thing.
Yeah, once in a blue moon I try. Yeah, no, I am not good at social media. And then I also have a monthly newsletter, which I really have enjoyed doing, and that has a little thing about musings about science fiction. It's a little mini essay every month, as well as author updates and personal updates. Oh
Did you
yeah,
hear
and book
that?
recommendations. Thank you.
A subscriber.
A person I do not know in the audience who must subscribe to this for some reason. Oh my gosh, I have a fan. Yeah, no, that's actually one of my favorite parts of it is book recommendations, because I do enjoy. I'm a big reader, and I like including book recommendations.
Yes, and I'm also on Instagram, probably a bit too much, but I do have a link tree on there, and it does point to our newsletter. So it's nice to hear from any of you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you guys so much, and thank you, Lainey Rose, who put this whole thing together for us. We really appreciate you and all of your colleagues. Thank you so much for hosting us.
Oh, and here's the thing that Yume and I always say when we come to these events, which is like, we love coming to bookstores, and we love it when you buy our books, but most importantly, we love that you just buy books, period. Like, that's the win.
We want them to feel like after we walk out of here that we were such hot stuff, that you guys were inspired to buy lots of books, and we doubled their sales.
Yeah, because like, this place is not a museum. You get to take stuff home after you buy it, you know?
And then maybe they'll have us back.
Yeah. Microphone.
Thank you all very much. You get a good grade in a book event today. I thank you to our virtual audience for joining us as well, and thank you to everyone for being here. I'm going to now send